I'd rather create something that others criticize than create nothing and criticize others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like a weapon.
It's not about the figures, it's about who those figures are.
The Hospodpreneurs Podcast.
I'm going to drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to episode 36 of the Hospodpreneurs Podcast. You know by now that I'm never afraid to get into deeper conversation. Mitch Wilson and I discuss branding, business, booze and the like on the episode today, picking a popular pineapple product and proud to Peddle Plantation with Mitch Wilson. Welcome. Hello and welcome to the show, Mitch.
Hello, how you doing?
Very well, thanks, mate. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
I like to start the show by asking if you have a crazy hospitality story.
Yeah, I've been listening to your show and I realise that's the thing. Most of my crazy stories come from two main places. I got trained by a guy called Jim Wrigley in London who taught me the art of the lock-in, and we ran a place called Made in the Shade for 6 months, which I lived on top of the bar, and basically for 6 months we just didn't see anything really outside of Hoxton Street in London. I then brought that lock-in philosophy to Sydney, where we were at a place called Henrietta's, and that lock-in lasted almost 2 years, where, yeah, in that time we saw a lot of things happen, like a lot of things that you really wanted to see and a lot of things that you definitely didn't. A lot of exposure, a lot of nudity. We saw a woman dressed as Catwoman come into the bar.
Was it well dressed?
It wasn't the best. It certainly wasn't like a Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman, but
belly hanging out.
No, lovely, but yeah, just had a few drinks. She ended up getting arrested by the end of the night. That was a pretty crazy one.
This is in Sydney.
That was you don't expect Catwoman to get arrested in real life.
She got caught.
And then, she got caught finally. Yeah, after all these years. What else? Yeah, we've had all sorts of things happen. It kind of just all blends into one very long night.
Oh yeah, it's a difficult question because it's hard to just pinpoint one thing, and if someone didn't give me some stimulus as to a particular thing, then I would have trouble. Like, one of my stories would be that I was working at a pub club. It was a pub, and at night it became a club. There were two friends and one of the gentleman's girlfriends were with them, so it was three people. They were having a bit of a chat. And it started to get a bit heated between the guys, and the girlfriend was back a little bit further. But anyway, the two guys were sort of starting to get fired up. We're taught that in places like that you never call code red for anything like that. Code red is actually something serious, like all out brawl. But some places, smaller venues, will be like code red, but it's actually, two little dudes. Even if they're like medium-sized guys, two guys, they're probably just having a crack at each other, then it's nothing serious yet. But that comes across when you start working in different venues and people have had different radio experience. But I've digressed a little. Back to the story. The two guys were getting very fired up. One fella turned around, the other one walked up to him and sort of tapped him on the shoulder or pushed him or something. And that's when I turned around and the guy shouts at him. He's like, "Oi!" And the other one turns back around and he swings. Right? The fellow ducks and he punches his own girlfriend in the mouth.
No.
And knocks her teeth out. Lost her teeth. Gone. So I spent the next half hour consoling this girl while she was looking between me and the mirror and I, and she's just absolutely shocked, no teeth in her mouth, at the front anyway. And I'm just like, well, look, these are the things you got to deal with, in hospitality. This girl now doesn't have any teeth in her mouth, and I've got to console her. So I did, and I just explained that dentists do this. This is they are very familiar with this sort of activity. And in the end, she felt a little bit better that it can be fixed. And, we have to ask if she wants to press charges and all this stuff. But without some sort of stimulus, it's hard to come up with these sorts of stories, right? I'd like to ask you, Mitch, why you do what you do.
That's a very good question. I ask myself that a lot.
This is a deeper question. So I really want to know fundamentally what it is that you're passionate about, what drives you, what really inspires you to do what it is that you do.
I suppose I've always had a philosophy of trying to leave things better than I found them. So I guess there was a speaker I listened to years and years ago, and his idea was like, no matter where you went, if you went to someone's house, if you did a job, if you worked for someone, if you were just visiting a friend or whatever, it's like you try and leave that place better than you found it. So it might just be paying a nice compliment or doing something good for them or leaving a gift or something.
Yes.
But
who was he?
I think it was one of those old school speakers like Jim Rohn or something like that.
That was who came to mind, actually, and I'm not sure why.
I feel like that was one of his things. So and it was always philosophy I thought was really interesting, like, you know, what if you could leave everywhere better than you found it? Because generally we don't. Generally we leave everything worse, or we leave mess, or we we leave things worse than we found it.
Yes.
And
entropy at its finest.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very instinctive to us. So it's definitely a conscious effort sometimes. But I've always lent towards careers that involve like training or education, or trying to like, guess my gift or my thing that I really enjoy is developing people. So, you know, wherever they're at, it's like, okay, where do you want to be, and how can we take you from where you are now to where you want to go? So with rum now, teaching bartenders around Australia and going through education on that, how to understand that better, hopefully that helps. And then through things I've done in the past like karate and other stuff, it's always been how do we bring out the best in this person in whatever field it is.
Yes, you touch on karate there. I want to open that up a little bit more. It's just sort of like glanced over that, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. That's interesting about wanting to leave something better than the way you found it, and that's led you into sort of education. For me, it's similar in that the way that I describe it, my why is I say elevating universal consciousness, and a lot of people have connotations involved with some of those words, but for me that's really just about understanding and enjoying life the best way that we can, and constantly exploring and uncovering new ideas and discussing concepts and questions. So it's very similar, my why. So I find that very interesting to explore. Tell us a little bit more about what you do now.
So now I'm the brand ambassador for company called Maison Ferrand. It's based out of Cognac in France, and we have three sort of main pillars, I guess, which are Pierre Ferrand Cognac, Plantation Rum, and Citadel Gin. So my job with them as an ambassador is sort of going around Australia and New Zealand, training bartenders on what the products are, why they're good, how to use them. But I guess in a broader sense, I find, well, especially with the rum and the cognac, they're spirits which I think are largely misunderstood, you know, and I think gin training is quite prevalent and quite strong in the country right now, but things like rum and cognac, a lot of people don't really know like the history of them or where it all came from and everything like that. So I guess in a broader sense, like, yes, I try to, obviously I want any bartender who I drink with to love Plantation or Pierre Ferrand, but I'm more interested in getting them excited about spirits that they don't actually play with normally or don't use as bartenders as much, because it's something that they don't lean on as heavily, you know. So it's I guess just getting people excited about a spirit in general, and even if it's something else, like, great, as long as you're interested in rum in general, like I can make you excited about it. So
yes, that's a really interesting perspective as well. We have had a couple of episodes from brand ambassadors, and even Cam Pirat became a brand ambassador after his episode on the show. This discussion with brand ambassadors isn't new for the podcast.
Yeah.
What is it that you do differently to other brand ambassadors?
Oh, that's a good question. I do a lot with pineapples, which I think other brand ambassadors don't really champion that. I've definitely modelled myself off brand ambassadors who I really respect. The first one being Jim Wrigley, who was the guy who brought me into the bar industry as a whole back in London at a bar called Trailer Happiness. And he was the global ambassador for Santa Teresa rum. So straight away I had this connotation of what a brand ambassador life should be like, traveling the world, buying shots, you know, having this great time. From his stories, and he was very good at telling a story, still is.
Every salesman should be.
Well, yeah. But yeah, from his stories, that to me always seemed like the pinnacle. I never thought I'd be good enough or know enough about it to actually do it, but I always thought that was like the top of the industry. And then since then, other people I met, so Paul McFadden, who's a very good friend of mine, he actually works for Ferrand, but in Europe. And really the person who inspired me over here in Australia the most was a guy called John Gakuru, who made everyone love Fernet. And if you can do that, that's pretty incredible. So, but the thing I really respected about all of them, and the thing that I've tried to take forward now, they could tell you everything about their brand and they could make you love their brand, and that was great. First of all, they were all really good people and they're all just good humans. They were people you wanted to hang out with regardless. But also, if you were having a drink with them and you were going to drink something else, like, they could tell you about any spirit, they could tell you about any category. It didn't matter if it was their rum or if it was someone else's or whatever.
Yes.
It's like, and I see a lot of companies very much toe align with, I don't know if it's marketing or something else, or they feel like, oh, I can't say I like this other rum, or I can't say I like this other whiskey, and it's like, I only drink this. And you're like, man, like, if I met a bartender who'd only drunk one spirit, I wouldn't ask.
Wouldn't trust him.
I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, you've got to know everything. You've got to try everything, and it's okay to like other things, and that's what I mean. Like, I walk into a lot of trainings where bartenders might know zero about rum, or they're just starting off in the industry, and it's like, you've got to know about everything in your category. Like, of course, I want you to love plantation, but I want you to be excited about rums from Barbados, Jamaica, Grenada. Like, I want you to get excited about the whole Caribbean and find your favorite, find your thing. If it's not ours, that's okay. But it's okay to talk about other things. And I think it gets very boring if an ambassador just talks about their product the whole time. They need to be read a book, do something else. Like, it's be able to talk about things outside of that.
It actually makes people, and this is outside hospitality as well, this is for anyone who represents a brand, and ultimately we all do represent some sort of brand, whether it's a company that we work for or ourselves, right? And the more honest and open we can be about our product, the more people will trust it as well.
Yeah.
So it's indifference. It's an indifference. And being indifferent, I've found, is ultimately the best closing technique for sales.
Right. Yes.
It's once someone's ready to buy something anyway, once you're indifferent, people will be like, you know what, I think I will get that. Only once they're ready. So once they've built enough rapport with someone, you can be like, ultimately it's like, you're having a chat, they get to know you, and then you go, this is this thing that I have, and then this is where some people push it.
Yeah.
And they're like, push that thing. But the best way to deal with it when it's there is to go, this is this thing that I have. And then you pull it away. You go, it's cool. This is my thing. You don't have to have it. Like, if you don't want it, that's totally fine. I'm going to take it elsewhere. If you don't, that's okay. I'll see you later. Right? And then they're like, oh, but I really want that thing. And they come, and they're like, it's like, I suppose it's like fishing. I'm terrible at fishing, but apparently it's like fishing. But indifference is the key. Indifference makes the difference. There we go.
That's a hashtag.
That's awful. I might use it though. Great. Yeah. So it builds trust and rapport when you can be honest.
Yeah.
So I really like that that answer there about providing a platform for people to explore products, and it may not be the one that you or we or someone else represents.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
I really like it when, like, last night we were out with some of the other ambassadors, because it's Saturday night, so obviously all the bartenders are working and all the ambassadors just having a night out, and we had Lockie from Archie Rose, Morgan from Hendrix, Carmen from Vanguard, and like all of us like bouncing around. Nick Miles was throwing a party from Sailor, and it's like, there shouldn't be that divide. We should be able to all work together and hang out. And one of my favourite things is going to other ambassadors' trainings and watching them present. Those people do amazing jobs. Like, I know one of your podcasts was with Dan Woolley, who looks after Lefroy, and like watching him present about whiskey, it was like a half an hour chat. It was one of the best whiskey trainings I've been to in the country. It was absolutely awesome. And
he's Mr. Whiskey.
Yeah, and it's and so many people who do a wonderful job. And I think by learning off each other and by sharing stuff, like, I hate this idea that it's like, I can only talk about this and this is our official marketing spiel. And like, I'm lucky in that with Ferrand and Plantation, like, we're very open about just we can talk about what we want to talk about. You know, we can be very open and very transparent, and I think working with a smaller brand like allows us to do that. But yeah, it's always lovely to see when big brands are happy to collaborate and work with others. It's nice to see everyone come together.
It builds that rapport and that trust when we're honest about our products, and I think that's super valuable and not enough. I don't know if that's a trend that's been happening. I suppose there's a lot of talk about authenticity that's really become a thing. It's a bit of a buzzword that's come up in the show before, but interesting to think about that, providing that transparency about our products. I'd like to ask you a bit more, Mitch, about, so you touched on karate before. Can you tell us a bit about your background with karate and also with writing? Let's talk about karate first, and then we'll go to writing. So,
yeah, sure.
What did you do with karate, and how did it even help you with your own personal development?
I'd always wanted to do martial arts of some sort. You know, I'd grown up watching Ninja Turtles, and
Yes.
it was very.
Which one was your favourite, by the way, as a side of my head?
Well, I started off liking Donatello the most, but as I grew older, it became more Raphael. I liked his, carefree attitude with things. But my mum would never let me do it when I was a kid. She thought it'd be too dangerous, and so when I was old enough to do it, I started when I was like 16, 17, and joined this karate club, and just loved it. I'd wanted to do it for 10 years, and now I could get it stuck into it, and then got offered this training program to get into it, and so ended up doing it full time, becoming an instructor, and doing that for about 8 years, I think. But what I got from it, what it developed was there's a lot of not just the physical side with karate. Obviously, it makes you very, very fit, but certainly the mental side and the calmness and the balance you get from it was something I really took away. It develops, your mental, your spiritual. I think it balances you out as a person, which was great. And then being in a place where you're responsible for teaching people and training them, it's. I think there's part of that karate training is getting them to a place where, yes, they can defend themselves, and yes, they probably could win any fight if they found themselves in one, but you're developing them in a way that they never want to start that fight, or they never want to have to resort to violence if they don't have to. So it's I found the mental and spiritual side much more engaging, I guess, overall than just the physical. So.
Yes, that resonates with me. I did Taekwondo when I was a little kid,
right? Yeah,
and
cool.
It's very, very similar. And I grew up learning those skills. I only did it for 3 or 4 years. When I was 7 to 11 years old, so I was a little kid. I almost got to black belt, but I didn't quite.
Yes.
I went back last year to start up again, but
nice.
I didn't commit to it, and I would like to, and get my black belt. But it taught me those skills. And how do you think someone can learn those underlying lessons? Because a lot of people miss that stuff. Whether it's in any field, they can learn those things. Any art form or technical skill can involve those underlying factors. How can someone learn them?
There has to be a desire to want to improve yourself or work on yourself. I think,
Self-awareness.
Yeah, it's very easy for us to get caught up with work, and you just get into your 9 to 5, and I'm guilty of it. I think most people are, and you just get busy, and you forget to read that book you wanted to read, or you forget to go and see that art exhibition you wanted to see, and like whatever it is. But I think having a place where you're going to grow, whether that's knowledge or your spirituality or your fitness or whatever, like you've got to find these creative outlets, and you've got to take time for yourself. It's I'm very bad at it. Like I'll get into I'll get into work and just not stop until I fall down. But when you make that time to go, okay, how am I going to grow? How am I going to learn from this? Like if you haven't learned something this week or this month or this year, if you're just doing the same thing day in, day out, that old definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, and I really believe people can aspire to be better than where they're at, or they can aspire to have a better position, or you can get to wherever you want to go, but you have to work on it, and you have to make those changes, and I don't think it's a bad thing. It's not like, oh, you can't be who you are. It's like no, you just have some skills or have some a muscle that you need to develop and grow. And if you can do that, then why not become a brand ambassador, become a karate instructor, become whatever it is you want to do. And we're seeing it a lot in hospitality as well. Like some people now, there's some great initiatives coming out of London, like this healthy hospo, like trying to give bartenders a different focus so they can actually develop their physical and mental well-being. And there's been a lot of talk about, you know, more mental health things, and that being not a taboo subject anymore for people to talk about. People like Camille Vidal from Saint Germain, like becoming this awesome yoga instructor, and like things that you don't think necessarily go with the traditional bartending model. It's like, it's amazing to see these people develop in other ways and develop these great skills alongside their main.
I'd love to do an episode on mental health because it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. So that's something I've had in the back of my mind for something to come up. So I'm sort of waiting for something's going to come in. Something's going to come in. We're going to have an episode on that at some stage. So if you listen to the show, there will be a mental health episode at some stage. I want to ask you a bit more, Mitch, about what led you into hospitality. And we're going to touch on your writing here.
So I met this guy when I was working at Apple in London. For one random year I worked at Apple so I could buy some cheap laptops and things. And I met a guy there called Felix. And Felix and I became incredibly good friends. And every weekend Felix would go and make a load of money bartending. And I thought, and he'd come back with these stories of, you know, people he'd met, or, you know, girls he'd hooked up with, or whatever had happened. And I was like, this sounds great, you know. I was like, teach me how to make a drink. And he's like, oh, you know, one day, yeah, sure. It never really happened, but you know, I thought it was great. We went and had a few drinks with him every now and then when he was working, and I thought it seemed really fun. It seemed like you were the life of the party as the bartender, you know, or certainly the way he did it. And then he introduced me to a man called Jim Wrigley, and at the time Jim was running a bar in Napa, California, and we hung out one night talking about everything outside of bartending, literature, books, writing, all this kind of stuff. And I just thought, what an incredible character, you know. And I was like, someone should write a story about this guy. We left the next day and carried on. We were doing a road trip across America, and I was like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to write a story about this man. Like, such an interesting character. But being a bartender, he was never available. So, you know, the only time you could ever hang out was actually if you wanted to work with him. So I did, and he'd said to me once, like, if ever you need any shifts, or if ever you want to learn to be a bartender, like, just come in, like, I'll look after you wherever you are. I was like, cool. A few months later, I was a tour manager for a friend of mine, Kieran Leonard, and we were touring Europe and the States, and we ended up in London. I needed money, we both needed money. So at the time, Jim was working at this very famous tiki bar called Trailer Happiness, which is this incredible bar in Notting Hill in London, and it's you know, sort of one of the pillars of rum over in the UK. Jim was running the bar at the time, and so I went to Trailer. I was like, Jim, you said if ever I was to learn to be a bartender, you'd have shifts for me. Here I am, I'm ready. And he was like, yeah, I've got absolutely no shifts for you whatsoever. I was like,
oh no,
right, okay. And I was like, well, how do you get into bartending? You know, it just seemed like I got given this book, Joy of Mixology by Gary Regan. And I was told, like, read this book, and I'm reading it, and like, what the hell's a Negroni? What's a Manhattan? What's vermouth? You know, like, I'm looking at all this stuff going, where do you start? Like, I'd been a karate instructor for 8 years. I hadn't really drunk anything for 8 years. So I was looking at this, like, it wasn't like I went to bars every night and knew what all the different spirits were. I was coming from, like, a complete, you know, zero perspective. So I looked at this book. I was like, I can't learn through reading a book, you know. From karate, I'd known I could copy people. I could watch movements and imitate them. And I could go, right, okay, you just did this, this, and this with these 3 bottles, and it made this, and it looks like this, and this is how you do it. So I was like, I need to be in the bar watching people, learning them hands-on. I started going to Trailer quite a bit just as a guest and sort of watching what they did and just trying to sort of study and see, you know, how do you get into this? How do you begin? I realized that the thing that every bartender hates and everyone wants to avoid is the clean down at the end of the night. A few weeks, I sort of started just, you know, every second, third day or whatever, I'd go down to the bar about an hour before close, Jim would always be there, like open arms, have a beer, have a shot, let's go. And then when it came to closing time, I'd just start help cleaning down tables. I was like, I'll do this, I'll do that. And Jim would be like, cool, we can't pay you. I'm like, that's fine. Did that a few times. And then one day he called me up. He's like, cool, the barback didn't show up. Your first shift's tonight. And that was how I got the foot in the door, so to speak. So, started polishing glasses, started being shown what laybacks were. It was my chance to sort of spend time with these people who, coming from 8 years of very disciplined karate to this manic world of bartending where booze is flying, a trailer, there's this massive copper roof above the bar, and the bartenders would take a mouthful of Ray and Nephew, set their fingers on fire and breathe the Ray and Nephew over the copper roof, and this fireball would just emerge across the room, and the whole room would lift up, and with the copper it all goes like green and blue and this crazy thing. Like, I'd never seen people breathe fire before in a bar. Like, that's crazy. And being exposed to this world, it was just this ultimate party. And the stories you get out of it, and the things, most of which you can't say, but it was just this very exciting, engaging world, and getting to know people like Jim, like Paul, and all these incredible people who've come around from the world. I feel like the hospitality industry is such a melting pot for different cultures and different backgrounds of people. Like, very few people intend to end up in hospitality, which is awesome, so their backgrounds are always so different and so engaging. I almost encourage people, like, if you started straight in hospitality, like, do other things as well. Get some good stories under your belt, because if all you do is make drinks, like, your chat's going to be really bad. You need a good story about something. To be honest, I never thought I'd end up in the hospitality industry as full time. I thought I'd just be writing or doing something else, or tour managing, or one of these other things. Yes. And then you get to a place where you get just good enough and where you're like, I want to learn more, I want to do a bit more, and doing something. Not just working in the same place over and over again, but actually learning, growing, developing, challenging yourself. And
yes, you mentioned there about hospitality being a melting pot, and that people don't really expect to have a career in hospitality a lot of the time. Sometimes that's different in different countries, because there are programs and colleges for people to train in hospitality a lot more in other countries. I know in the States it's a thing, whereas in Australia it's not really a thing people know about. But the point that I wanted to get onto there, I guess we could digress with that sort of question. What I wanted to sort of more get into is the fact that it's a melting pot is why I'm really excited about it being a place for so much innovation. Because you've got all these people with totally different ideas and backgrounds, and I don't feel like it's being harnessed as well as it can be. So that's what I try to do through the show, is motivate and inspire people to create and innovate in hospitality. So the more that I can do to show people these sorts of things that you just brought up, the better. So I really appreciate you saying that sort of thing, and then that coming out through our chat today as well. I want to ask you, Mitch, what are you learning about or exploring right now?
I guess a big project of mine at the moment is understanding rum better, understanding rum's influences, where it's coming from, understanding all sides of all the arguments, not just one brand's perspective. I just got back from a big trip, so it was one of the better work trips I've had. So we got flown to Cognac in France, did like 10 days of training with all the Maison Ferrand crew from around the world, and it was like I kind of thought it would just be like us drinking all day, having a great time, and it wasn't at all. It was like, like full-on technical seminars looking into how spirits are, chemically made up, how different flavor compounds work together to create what they create, and really getting into the science of it, which I found, fascinating. From there, we got flown to Barbados to see our new distillery at West Indies, and this mad old, the West Indies rum distillery, this old distillery from like 1893, and seeing like how rum's made. And then we went to Grenada to see how they made rum, and across to Martinique as well, seeing agricole, and it was really fascinating. It was a great experience. It was one of these things where you can talk about it, or you can theorize about it, or you can read all the books, but until you're there, until you smell it, until you see, the culture firsthand and how they treat rum. There's that little part which now seeing it firsthand, it's like, right, okay, I get it now, and it's just inspired me to go and see more. So understanding things on a higher level with what we do is kind of the thing that really excites me. Like, obviously I do trainings on plantation and we go through it all and I'll tell you the whole history of it, but I want any rum nerd in the world to be able to go, okay, tell me this about rum, answer this to me, and me to be able to go, right, sit down, let's go through it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's always someone smarter than you out there. There's always someone who knows a bit more or read something you haven't. But yeah, my goal is to, I guess, be that expert, and for any rum, for any country. So
That's awesome. I really like that. What innovations or innovative techniques have you seen in the industry while you've been in it?
when I started, we were just on this cusp where the cocktail had begun its second golden age. Like we've claimed back all these old cocktails which we were screwing up for years, and these old bars like Milk and Honey have paved the way for this resurgence in cocktail culture. And so it's a really good time to come into the bar industry. Now we're seeing things come up where I think bartenders are challenging now. It's like, okay, we've got the basics down, we've reclaimed the old fashioned, we've got all our classics perfect. Now what do we do next? How do we push things forward? So I work with a bar in Sydney called PS40. So I bartend there whenever I'm in town or they have an event on. And the guys who run that bar is Tor Bergquist and Michael Cham, and they're two of the most creative people I've ever met. Like talking to these guys about flavors or ideas, like the ideas they have are just off the wall, and like I'll have chats with Tor quite often, like when you really get into his way of thinking, man, you're like some mad genius, you're like this artist and now he's making this whole soda range and playing with things which are just incredible. So for me, I mean, that's probably the most progressive bar I've seen in Australia. Obviously in London you had places like White Lion, which has basically won every award in the world, to the point where they're like, okay, there's nothing else we can do, let's close and let's reopen another concept just to challenge ourselves and do something new. So yeah, people like Ryan, and out of there you had people like Ian Griffiths and Kelsey Ramage, who are now doing the Trash Tiki movement and really pushing bartenders to be a bit more conscious about what we're doing in the bar, not being wasteful, having ethics to our bartending as well, which I certainly was nothing. I'd never looked at a straw, in the same way years ago, but now every bartender and a lot of bars are moving away from straws and like actually going, let's look after the plant, let's do something good. And I think it's very easy to go, well, we're just a small bar, we don't make an impact, but if everyone does it, of course that's going to make a massive impact.
And the sort of volume that we pump out of these sorts of things, it will make that difference too.
Yeah, and it's funny now. Like yesterday, I went to have a coffee and got like an iced coffee, and they gave me a straw, and I'm like, why are you giving me a straw? Like you just killed a turtle, So,
it's that transitionary period as well. So like what I'm totally about, obviously helping the environment and doing our part to contribute. What sometimes I get frustrated by is when people get angry because you gave them a straw. It's like, look, we're not. It's still happening. It's not there yet.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's it does. It takes a while. And like there was a really cool post this week from one of my favourite bars in Perth, a place called Mechanics Institute. They just put up a really cool post explaining why they were changing, going to no straws, and you could buy a metal straw, and they'll clean it for you and they'll do all this kind of stuff. And like it's good to see people in the industry who are kind of leading the way and setting the example for other bars. And that's the thing that I guess all innovation comes from doing something different to everyone else, and it doesn't always work. You've got to be willing to put yourself on the line, and sometimes you're going to screw it up, or sometimes you're not going to get there. But if you can push things forward in some way and not just do the same thing over and over again, but really challenge people's, whether it's their palates with cocktails in the bar, whether it's their ethics with sustainability and other things, or whether it's things like their mental health and spiritual well-being, and like all their ambassadors and people who are now pushing this healthier lifestyle. I think
that's what I like to think that we're doing with the show, is challenging people's minds and their ideas behind what hospitality offers more holistically.
Absolutely, because for me, the perfect night out is when you hang out with someone, you just get to have a great conversation with them. But it's very, very easy now in the streets just have the same chat again and again and again, and everyone's just talking about how tired they are or how hungover they were. And that's a part of it. Don't get me wrong. Like, you've got to be there for your friends, but yeah, it's good to get under the surface sometimes and really understand who these people are, because there are some incredible people that are out there in the industry, and some have been through some incredible life experiences before. So not always positive, like often not. But that's what makes these people so interesting and so great to talk to. So.
Yeah, in hospitality, you really have to be a cunning linguist, right? You do. You have to be able to resonate with people who just want small talk and people who want a deeper chat. And personally, I am quite bored by small talk, and that's actually has to be your specialty in hospitality, because everyone walks in the door. Like, a lot of people are going to be fresh, they're going to be new, they don't know who you are, they've never met you before, you've never met them, so you've got to be really good at building rapport really quickly, and that's also a skill that can then be translated into sales or all kinds of other industries. Those small chats and people just complaining really bores me. So I am terribly bored by small talk and conversation like that. So I've always made it a point of mine to have really deep discussions really quickly. And that's why I start with why. That's why I like having the conversations I have on the show. I find it infinitely more fulfilling when you can talk about big ideas all the time. Like, I have no interest in what the weather's like, or and people might be offended by this, but like, how many children they have or what they ate for breakfast. It doesn't interest me. I care about who someone is fundamentally.
Sure.
And to me, that's their ideas, because we're a lot more than just our physical construct. So I want to know what people believe, what they're passionate about, what they feel, what they're scared by. Deep chats are what make it for me, and people feel things when you have deep conversations. They actually have to think about an answer.
Yeah.
And this is the difference. A lot of people have a hip fire answer when it's like, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I'm this.
Yeah.
But when you ask why people do what they do, then you see them think, because they've either not thought about it, or they have to recall something that they've not thought about for a while.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's why I like those deep conversations, because you make people think. So even in the bar, I like to have conversations like that where I can. Obviously, some people get scared by too deep chats.
Well, you have to build up that trust with someone, I think, before they truly open up, and it's worth finding those people there. You've got to seek them out, and if you find someone who's a little bit interesting, it's like, all right, let's hang out, let's go for lunch, let's go to a gallery or something, let's talk and let me find out who you are, because
absolutely,
yeah,
I think everyone has those things to offer. It's just that they might not have thought about them as much, and they haven't trained that way of thinking. It's just a way of thinking, and sometimes we're scared, or that's what's limiting us. But I think everyone inherently has this capability and would enjoy thinking about these things if they can sit with problems longer. I think Einstein said, it's not that I'm smart, it's that I am able to sit with problems longer. And I don't know if that's verbatim, but it was something like that.
Yeah.
I'll post it up in the episode notes and an actual quote. Yeah, it's something that I think about all the time. Like, my favorite thing to do, either drink a cocktail in a bar on my own, and I like to just sit in a nice bar and drink a cocktail on my own and think, or sit at home and drink wine and think and listen to music. That's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah. And bars are a good place for, obviously we're in the industry, so we're working at them most of the time, or we're going to see your friends there, but we've got to remember bars are these places where people can come and unwind and let go of whether it's inhibitions or just their week, or that they come there to let something out quite often. So And if you can facilitate that as a bartender, if you can, introduce someone that you think these two people have never met, but you've spoken to them both, you think they're going to get along as friends.
Yes.
Like that's always, it's one of my favorite things at a bar is like you have 4 people who come in, they're drinking on their own, they don't know each other, and by the end of the night you get them all hanging out and they've made new friends.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's one of our main responsibilities as a bartender is not the drinks, but it's part of that hospitality. It's part of making sure people have a great time, and if they're not having a great time, how do I change that for you? Who do I introduce you to? What do we do for you? And it's not always just shots. Sometimes it is shots, but
sometimes that facilitates the conversation.
Usually for me it's a daiquiri, but yeah, like if you can change something or let them air or vent or just meet someone that changes their night, that's awesome. So.
And gauging what people want. Because you might see that this person would be great to meet this other person, but then they're just not in the state, not in the zone. They're not feeling it today. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm not going to enforce what it is that I think should happen in this scenario. It's like, you're doing your thing. That's totally cool. Yeah. And just respecting that as well. So
yeah, you've got to read that as a bar. Sometimes you can try too hard.
Yeah, you become good at reading that.
Yeah.
And great at understanding people and building rapport very quickly. That's one of my favourite things about working in the bar.
Yeah.
What changes do you want to see take place in the industry?
I would like us to... okay, what's my list of demands for the bar industry? I think the number one thing I'd like is for us all to become better hosts, for us all to look after each other better, whether that's fellow bartenders or our guests. Like I remember coming into the industry and I'd say in myself I'm quite introverted. Like I quite happily sit in the corner of a bar, not talk to anyone, and read a book. That's a great night out. When I started bartending and certainly now as an ambassador, you realize that it's not about you. If you're a bartender and you're naturally introverted, which a lot of them are, certainly I was, it's not for you to be the quiet or embarrassed one, or to not welcome a guest with open arms and not make their night feel amazing. Like you want to challenge yourself to be, that all-encompassing host. Someone walks into the room and you make them feel like $1 million. There was this great security guard last night. We went to a bar called the Cloakroom, and there was this big guy outside. Massive guy, goatee, shaved head, the whole lot. Yeah. And
he's very good.
We walked up. What's his name?
I can't remember his name. I wish I remembered his name.
He's awesome. You should get him in to talk about how to be an awesome security guard. And I was like, you're probably the best security guard I've seen in the country. And it was so great. We walked up, straight away. My friend who he knew, he was like, "How are you?" And like welcomed them, and then he put on the radio. He's like, "We've got 2 amazing people coming up to the bar right now, just letting you know." I was like, how cool is that? Like, even though like we've just met this guy or whatever, we're just hanging out, the fact he introduces you that way, an introduction can mean everything. I hate when you get groups of friends or people and like someone's left out. It's like, how do you introduce them? How do you make that person who might not even feel that great about themselves, but okay, this is why this person's incredible. Everyone, this is James. He runs this awesome podcast. He's a massive big deal. Like, everyone, you've got to meet James. And, straight away, you're like, I'm feeling great. And everyone in that group suddenly now knows how to connect with you. They might know something to talk about, In a long-winded way, I'd like us all to become better hosts. I'd like us to be better ambassadors for our bar, for each other, for our friends. It's like whatever you're getting behind, make someone feel great. That's your job. So yeah.
Oh, I like that. And obviously that extends to the brands we represent, whether they're ourselves or, as you said, our friends or whoever.
Sure. You want to be proud. Like, I see some people work at bars and they're like, yeah, I don't like it. It's like, well, don't work there. Go and find something else. Go and step outside of your comfort zone. It's like you should be so proud of the place you work at or whatever it is you're doing, the brand you represent, whatever. Like, if you're not 100% proud of it, then find something else.
We touched on our chat before the show about the potential for, because we've been talking a little bit about innovation, about the future of sales. Is that something that you've thought about, or maybe what innovations might be taking place in sales?
Sales, I avoid sales like the plague where I can. Like as soon as you say the word sales, I think it drums up connotations of horrible things.
Dirty, greasy car salesman.
Yeah, exactly. It's I know it's part of what we do, but I think about sales, so to speak, as a very different thing. Like I think, that's why, for me, being an ambassador is talking about stuff and educating and growing people, rather than let's talk about numbers and sign a contract. But in the bigger sense of the word, sure. I mean, like what I think. Hopefully sales are moving towards more of I'd like to see sales moving towards more like ethical standpoints and stuff like that. I know it's probably a bit idealistic, but not just ripping people off. Like how do we give people something good? But
yes.
Yeah.
I think I'm really interested in your answer because we've both worked at Apple.
Right.
And so we've both got that different experience in going through that program. Obviously we can't discuss too much because we had to sign things before that.
They'll come and find us.
Yeah, and they're big enough too. So I'm interested to see, because they were innovating at a time. What year did you work at Apple?
6 years ago now.
Yeah, because I was there in 2011.
Yeah, right.
So it might have been similar.
Yeah.
I don't know about now because I'm not inside, but it was super, super innovative at the time. And Steve Jobs was still around. It was just before he died, actually.
Yeah, same. I was there when it happened.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah.
Must have been a very similar time.
Yeah.
So those innovative techniques have then come through into, and I'm doing an inverted or quotation marks here, like inverted commas, sales. They've come through to sales more generally, but it was all solution-based selling, and that's become in the common vernacular, right? I'm interested to think about what the future might hold and what the new way of selling might be. And there was relationship selling, which I think is what sales is. That's
Sure.
all anything really is just relationships. That's why people say it's not what you know, it's who you know, and everyone ultimately connects with people, and the more people that you can connect with, the better. And that's another reason why I love hospitality, because the volume we pump through is so crazy. Yeah. If you can build that rapport really quickly, you can connect with more people more deeply and get more shit done.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So that's what really excites me about that volume.
I'm not sure what the next phase of selling would be, but I think the biggest thing, as we talked about before, was moving away from this basic features, benefits, to actually like what do you need, what do you want. You might not have what they need, and in which case don't sell them anything. But we see it all the time. The guest comes in and they just look lost and they don't know what they need, they just know they want something. And your skill to be able to show them the thing that they wanted that they didn't know they wanted, that's a pretty cool skill as a bartender. I think that was a Steve Jobs quote from back in the day. It's like he would give people the thing that they most wanted and they had no idea they needed at all. And I think again, this comes down to being a host. It comes down to whether you're in sales or you're a bartender or whatever. I guess all bartenders are salesmen to some extent, which is a horrible way to diminish the role of a bartender. But
with the term sales, maybe we should change the term.
Yeah, let's call it.
We'll call it something else. I want to call myself an unsalesman. But yeah, so you're saying that it might diminish the.
Our goal as a bartender isn't just to be there and put out drinks. Like we could have a machine for that, and like I'm pretty sure Japan's inventing a machine for that right now. If people wanted that, they could get it at home, they could get a robot to do it. Our goal is, yes, to be a host, yes, to find out what they need, and especially when they don't know what they want. I was at a bar last night. This girl came up to the bar, sort of looked at the menu for a good 5 minutes, just wasn't happy, and then she just looked at the bartender. Do you have espresso martinis or not? The bartender's like, of course. Sure. And there was this weird 5 minutes where she still didn't order an espresso martini, but then eventually walked away with a glass of rosé, And it was like a 10-minute process. And I remember thinking that, how could that have been done better? No one wants to be at the bar 10 minutes being indecisive, you know. But how do we find out what you really need and actually give you something which is going to be delicious, or it's going to be something more exciting? Like obviously you're sticking with what you know because you're safe with that. But our role as bartenders is, yes, to give people what they want, but also to find what's the thing you've never had which you really need, you know? And normally that's a daiquiri.
The 10-minute conversation at the bar doesn't always have to be confusing or uncomfortable. It could be that 10-minute conversation where a person doesn't have to be this particular. We're talking about this scenario now with this girl. Say she walks up, she says she wants an espresso martini, but then that 10 minutes of conversation could really be exploration into other things she's never even thought about, and then walks away with a rosé because that's what she really wanted. Maybe she just wanted something refreshing. That's what she really wanted, and she thinks that espresso martini is going to give her that. And that discussion with the bartender reveals that. You mentioned there about robots making drinks. There's a bar in Vegas that's doing that now, and I think that there must be others around the world doing it, but I know that there's one in Vegas, and it's basically a giant arm that just like and then like cracks it, and that's what it gives you. And the great thing about technology and machines like that is that it'll give you exactly what you order, exactly what you want. But what if you don't know really what you want? And that quote there you said about Steve Jobs, whether it's verbatim or not as well, the great visionaries and creative minds know what, or can see things that other people can't see yet. And they have to try to bring them to manifest them through some sort of medium into now. So couldn't work out what you really want and then deliver that to you. So that's the benefit in having a real life bartender deliver your drinks. I hope that we're not replaced by machines anytime soon.
Bartenders and hairdressers are pretty much the safest career long-term choices, I think. You know, it's so very hard to replicate, I think.
I'd like to just touch quickly on your creative process. So obviously you've got a background in music, in karate, so in bartending as well, and in hospitality.
Yep.
We've touched on the three areas that I think we should try to grow as often as possible, every day, even physically, intellectually, and culturally. And I'm interested to hear about the way that you work through problems, even coming up with an idea and then developing that and executing. That's a massive question. So whatever you want to focus on in that.
So obviously, as a guy, I you know, very much don't like opening up about problems or talking to people about emotions. So my solution to that is to write everything down. So, you know, I encourage you, get a journal. For me, writing through problems was always a way to open up without, you know, necessarily needing to expose myself in that way. If you can do that, do that. That's great. Have your friends that you can talk through things and do that. But for me, writing was my way of working through any problems, and often through that writing process, that's where I'd come through with an idea or a solution that I hadn't seen before. And it's amazing how much comes out from your subconscious, I think, when you write. It's really interesting to see what gets put down on paper. So writing has always been my way of dealing with problems. And then through that, as you said earlier, like your ability to sit with a problem for longer than anyone else. You know, problems are uncomfortable, challenges are uncomfortable. It's very hard to take an honest look at whether it's yourself or your situation or the place you work, and to be very open and honest and go, right, we need to fix things here or move things forward. But again, out of that creativity, or I think progress always comes from doing something different to what's been done before. You know, sometimes there's someone you can model, or a business that you can model, or a bar that you can model, and you can take those ideas and you can replicate them and make your place better for them. But when you've done all that, where do you go next? What's that next step? And yeah, it's a challenging process. I would like to think I'm creative, but I think really, if I'm honest, it's when I work with creative people who, you know, the kind of people that have all the off the wall ideas. You know, even ideas that, you know, would never ever work, but just the idea of them putting it out and saying stuff off the cuff, that the stuff that isn't logical, the stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense, out of those, sometimes there's a little gem, and you can go, maybe we can maybe we can make something great with that. So yeah, find interesting people to talk with. If you're not creative, find people who are more intelligent and smarter and creative than you are, and try and be friends with them. I think that's most of my success, is just trying to find people who are smarter than I am and trying to get them to hang out with me. So
That's interesting. Thank you for that answer then. What's your biggest challenge right now?
I would say finding that work-life balance, to use that cliche, but finding that work-health balance. I think, as an ambassador, it's pretty much the most fun job in the world that I can think of. Like, you go around, you get to see all of Australia or overseas. Like, we've just been back from the Caribbean, we've done this, but you get to go into bars, you have shots with bartenders. Like, it's the ultimate party life. It's awesome. But also, finding that balance where, okay, where do you look after yourself, your soul? Like, how do you stay healthy? And it's something I'm very conscious of. As when I first started bartending, I'd come from 8 years of karate. I was very, very fit, and I kind of just hung on to that fitness for a long time and thought, I don't need to train so much. And now I've been in the industry for 4 or 5 years. I'm like, oh, okay, no, I need to take care of my health as well. So I think it's something that we are becoming more conscious of as bartenders, but it's really important that we do it, and we find activities, whether it's playing a game of footy with your friends on a day off, or going to do something like the boys last night were talking about cricket, and they're playing cricket on certain days, and that's a great way for them to stay fit and balance out their work life. So when you love what you do, that's everyone's goal. I think it's a wonderful thing to work and love what you do, but it's also very easy to just get sort of blinkers and just do that all the time. So yeah, making time to do stuff outside of the industry as well, I think, is very, very important.
If someone wants to do what you do, what advice would you have for them?
If you want to be a brand ambassador, find a brand that you love first and foremost. Like, you're going to be drinking a lot of it, and it needs to taste as good at the at the end of the week as it did at the start. And I really think that the best brand ambassadors are people that they believe in what they do. When they talk about what they're doing, or they talk about the brand, or they buy you a shot, they genuinely love it. It's not an effort for them to smile and be like, "Oh, wasn't that tasty?" Like, no, they were drinking it before, they drink it now, and they still love it. So find a brand that you love, and don't necessarily wait for a position to come open. When I first started working with Plantation Rum over here, there was no brand ambassador position, and there was no intention for there to be a brand ambassador position. I was surprised because I knew Plantation from London, so I bought all the plantations in for the bar I was working at, and no one had ever seen it, and they're like, "What's this?" And I'd be like, "How do you not know? This is great." That for me was like, wow, how does no one know about this really cool rum, which was our staff shot at Trailer, and yet no one's seen it over here. So when I got put in touch with the company, I was like, this is what I think I could do, and it was initially they only had a part-time position, and they initially I was told they wanted a sales rep. It was like 2 days sales, and you know how I feel about sales. So I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And I was just like, look, how much are you going to pay someone to do 2 days sales every week? And they're like, it's going to be about this much a month. I was like, cool, give me a card with that much money on it, and I'll go and buy everyone a daiquiri, and if your sales go up and you sell more rum, then you can give me a job. And so for the first month, I just went around, bought everyone I could a daiquiri with this card, and they doubled their sales of Plantation in Sydney in the first month. And I was like, cool, well, this works. Who knew? Bartenders love shots and daiquiris. So, and so I kept doing this, and by the end of that 3 months, they were like, okay, it's grown enough that we can offer you a full-time gig. And I was like, great.
Awesome.
Sometimes finding that opportunity in a brand that's still starting up, or still they might not necessarily know what to do with it in this particular area, and if you see the opportunity and you love it anyway, go for it. Like, yeah, I think as soon as the the job position gets posted, it's almost too late. Like, you should try and find something that you love before it gets that big sometimes.
That was an awesome creative way to come up with a solution for Plantation as well, for the company more overall. Ultimately, where do you want to be, and what are you doing to achieve that?
I would like to be global ambassador for the world. Yeah, I'd like to travel more. I'd like to do more and more countries. I'd like to expand my role and take it to a higher level. I guess ultimately training other ambassadors and playing a part in that. The great thing we have with Maison Ferrand is everyone learns off each other. You know, it's a lot of working together. I work very closely with our ambassador in Asia, Michaela Piccolo, and she's just a phenomenal force of nature when she goes out to bars. And I've learned a lot about, you know, how she just creates this awesome environment for people when you walk into a bar, and she's one of those people that just lifts the room when she walks in. So she's really cool. Paul McFadden, again, I mentioned in London, he's just an incredible ambassador, and I based a lot of my trainings and my style off him. More countries, more travel, more time in the Caribbean. That's where I'd like my role to go, I guess.
Oh, I like that. What plans, this is my second last question, what plans do you have for the industry and the way that you want to contribute?
Obviously, education is my big focus with what I do. We started up a program a couple of years ago in Sydney called Academy of Bartenders, and the focus of that was to provide non-branded training where bartenders or brand ambassadors or anyone from the industry could come, tell their story, give their advice. So kind of like what you're doing here on the podcast for Hospropreneurs, but really getting people to engage with a story that wasn't just their brand story, you know, giving people advice, telling people how to become brand ambassadors or how to become top bartenders or bar managers. We actually built a really, really big following with it in Sydney, and that's something I would like to bring back. It's just purely having the time to do it. So if there's anyone out there who wants to help me out state to state and start this program, drop me a message. But
well, we might be keen with the show.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think there is so much we can offer as an industry to each other that isn't just getting drunk together at the end of a night at a bar. Like, we want to challenge each other to get creative, to build careers here that are going to last, are going to be, you know, long term, and, you know, in getting people to that position where they really love what they do. You know, I've got my dream job right now. You know, I can't, there isn't another job that I'd rather do, you know, and which is very weird. You know, I've spent my whole life aspiring to be something or be in some role, and now I'm in this role where it's like, this is amazing. I get flown to the Caribbean. How cool is this? You know, so if we can educate each other and share these ideas and get people to where they really want to be, I think that's what I would like to give back to the industry. So yeah, definitely, like, Academy of Bartenders was my method for that. There's great initiatives like Coleman's Academy, run by Paige O'Bour, and now as well Alice Newport here in Brisbane is helping her expand that and bring that to other states. I think that's this phenomenal program that they've put together for women in the industry. For me, like, everyone inclusive, getting everyone to learn and share ideas, that would be my next project that I'd like to get to.
So the next step on that journey, this is my last question, what's the next step for Mitch Wilson?
I guess my next goals this year, I'd like to get back into karate. I want to start training again. Maybe I'll open up a class for bartenders and we can teach the industry how to kick ass, literally. I'm hopefully going to get my first book published this year. It's very exciting. That's been in the works for a few years now. So I've got a kid's book which has been illustrated and hopefully coming out sometime this year. And then, yeah, just a load more travel, hopefully get to see some new countries, go and meet some new people, and just really, yeah, learning more this year is a big focus. Awesome.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on the show today, Mitch. It's been an incredible episode, a longer episode than normal, and there was just too much in there to cut us off. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you soon.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me.
Stay in touch with the show after hours at Hospopreneurs on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Do you know a hospopreneur? Shoot us an email, hospopreneurs@gmail.com. Creativity and innovation in hospitality. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson.